Let me start by saying good afternoon and welcome to the Women in Leadership for Finance Network and today's webinar. So amongst our series of webinars, this is the first of a little mini series of webinars aimed at supporting resilience through transition, and a specific focus today on personal resilience. So it is really great to have you all with us, and I hope that you're looking forward to the session today. As Nicola says, I know that we've got a few new faces in the virtual room, I should say, today. So if you are new, welcome. It's great to have you with us. For those of you that I haven't met, I'm Zoe Pietschak and I'm the Deputy Regional Director of Finance in the East of England, and along with Nicola, lead the Women in Leadership for Finance Network. So as always, I will keep my introduction brief because we have got a great session lined up and I definitely don't want to hold it up. So when we met last time, which was back in December, which does seem like a very long time ago now, we were really fortunate to be joined by the past 3 HFMA Directors of Finance of the Year award winners. So Catherine Phillips, Karen Gagan and Kathy Rowe, who talked to us about their career journeys. And I should also say at this point, actually, I saw Nikki joining us. A huge congratulations to Nikki Briggs, who won the award this year. Very well deserved. So one of the areas that each of our panel members talked about and had in common in December was that they'd each experienced a knockback in their careers. So a time when things didn't go quite right or as they'd wanted. And they each talked about how they'd overcome this and remained resilient. So not letting it affect their career aspirations and ultimately progressing their careers despite of it, or as we've seen in the chat, maybe even because of their experience. So I know that this struck a chord with me and many of us. And especially as we're entering a time of NHS reorganisation and the creation of ICBs, the dissolution of CCGs and the legislative changes that will facilitate system first. So our panel today are going to talk to us about personal experiences of knockbacks and about how we can build our own personal resilience in response. So I should also note that we've had a change of our panel, so Jazz Thind can no longer be with us this afternoon, but I am delighted to welcome Hayley Wardle and Amanda Reynolds. I'll let them introduce themselves properly when they start to speak. But in the meantime, both Hayley and Amanda bring with them a wealth of NHS leadership experience. And Amanda has used this to establish and lead a very successful coaching organisation called Blend, who specialise in working with the NHS. So just briefly before I hand over to the panel and to Nicola to kick off the conversation, as always, a couple of final comments from me. So we are meeting virtually today, so to ensure that everyone can see and hear the panel at all times, please can I ask you to keep your cameras off and stay on mute. Unless, of course, you're asking a question, then please do switch your cameras on and mute off. And please do ask questions, so either in the chat box or by raising your hand, and we'll bring you into the conversation as and when. And then finally, as always, please make the most of the hour that we've got together today. So please ask the questions that you want to, meet new people and engage with the discussion. This is your time, and as ever, it is safe, open and inclusive. So Nicola, over to you.
Thank you, Zoe. So yeah, we'd like to welcome Hayley Wardle, and I'll allow Hayley to introduce herself in a second. Hayley was recommended to us by Kathy Kennedy, one of our network members, because she demonstrated true grit and resilience in bouncing back from a huge setback in her career. This is a truly inspirational story, which Zoe and I were really interested in when we met Hayley in December, I think it was. So yeah, I'll hand you over to Hayley now, who will tell you a bit more about herself and also what happened to her, and perhaps we can have a bit of a chat. Please do ask questions as we go along as well.
Thanks, Nicola. So can I just check from thumbs up that Nicola, Zoe, you can hear me because I can see you. Excellent, good. Right, I'll start. So my name's Hayley Wardle. I'm an Executive Director of Finance at Southtyne.
I'm going to just mute myself.
Thank you. Sorry, a bit of feedback there. I'm Hayley Wardle. I'll start again. I'm the Executive Director of Finance at South Tyneside and Sunderland NHS Foundation Trust. And as Nicola and Zoe have kind of alluded to, I've had a bit of a path to this current position. So as a bit of a background to me, before we get on to what I was going to talk to you today about, is I'm a mum, I'm a wife, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter. I'm a load of different things, but I always introduce myself as an executive director of finance first, and particularly in these sorts of forums. So that just gives you a little bit of a context in terms of where I might go with this conversation. The discussion I had previously with Nicola and Zoe was around how I ended up where I am now and how I transitioned through a number of different places to get here. So if I give you a little bit of a brief overview, I haven't been in the NHS my whole career, so that sort of marked me out a little bit when I joined the NHS as different. I started my career in a professional services firm and worked very quickly up the ladder in a professional services firm to the point I was on a fast track to partner sort of placement and was doing very successfully in that. But then I had a bit of a crash of confidence when I was at about a senior manager level, and I really didn't feel like I had the integrity to take that position any further. Essentially, I was going into trusts, into CCGs or PCTs as it was at the time then, having conversations with very senior people about things I essentially had never lived through. I hadn't been there, I hadn't sat on that side of the table, and I really couldn't sell myself in that arena, I felt, to take on the next step. So I moved at that point into the NHS itself and took on a role at a local trust, County Durham and Darlington, as their Deputy Director of Finance. Really enjoyed it. We had 2 significant monitor reviews, which I did not enjoy, and we were reviewed for our financial sustainability excruciatingly over that period. However, learned a lot from that. And as a result, I was actually asked to join the monitor team when they set up NHS Improvement. So when Monitor was taken over by NHS Improvement and they were looking to set up kind of their governance structures particularly and some of their financial sustainability pieces. So I joined the North patch for NHS Improvement at that point, and that was roughly 2017, I think. Unbeknownst to me, clearly there was a direction of travel, and the direction of travel was to eventually merge or join teams with NHS England. And that's essentially where I ended up in this sort of position of having to take a significant step back in my career. And that was completely unplanned and completely threw me off track, and really did have quite a significant effect on me, my person and my career path, and how I was going to ultimately deal with that and thankfully end up where I am now. But when I took on the role at NHSI, it was a role of significant autonomy, and you were of significant seniority within the team that you could really drive your team and you could really be in charge of your areas and work really in a matrix structure with other clinicians, other multi-professionals, multidisciplinary professional team across HR, across medicine, across nursing. And it was a fantastic role and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then we hit a crossroads in that the two teams between NHS Improvement and NHS England joined together. And effectively, a lot of the NHS Improvement roles were banded less. And therefore, to call a spade, we couldn't apply for some of the roles to continue in that vein and continue in that manner. And you were forced to therefore take a more junior role and a little bit of a setback. That was really difficult. I have to say that was personally really difficult because it was not on my plan. So I'm a chartered accountant by background, as you'd expect, being a director of finance, and therefore I've kind of do have a bit of a spreadsheet analysis at life most of the time. I do have some clear defined plans, and I've usually got a plan A, B and C for everything, much to everybody's annoyance. And being thrown something completely out of left field, which meant that actually my overarching career plan was going to take a setback, was really, really quite difficult. So at that point, I decided I would start to look around for other roles, potentially taking a step back into the NHS directly, so back into a trust or a CCG perhaps. And I found it incredibly difficult, incredibly difficult. I went for a job at the ambulance trust in the Northeast Ambulance Service, and dealt with the quite rigorous interview process. That was also for a director of finance position, and got through to the very final 2 people in the interview process, and wasn't successful in the job. And that, again, from an already fairly difficult position, stepped me back even further because my confidence took an enormous knock. So what I did off the back of that was I went and sought a load of feedback from the interview panel, and I spoke to the interview panel, and I remember being at the side of the road at the Wynyard services coming up the A19 and having a conversation with somebody who was on the interview panel, who was very helpful and great in terms of giving feedback. but really sort of said, well, you know, you did really well and there's nothing really that you could do more. It's just that there's really no opportunities for people like you in the NHS. I said, well, what do you mean? I've sort of staked my entire career on the fact that I want to be here and I want to take this job forward and I want a career in the NHS and I've got really good track record and you've just told me that I did really well in the interview, but I didn't get it, so I can take that. But what do you mean there's no future for me? And he just sort of said quite bluntly, well, you know, we've got the ICBs coming. You're going through this major transition at NHS England and improvement. So really, I think you should probably think about going back to the private sector. And I sort of bumbled through the rest of the conversation and then ended up just putting the phone down and just having a good old cry at the side of the main road, because I really could not see a way out of the challenge that had been set. As in, I had a very respected individual in the NHS telling me really there was no future for me, and I'd sacrificed a hell of a lot to be in the position I was already in, and I really wanted to take that career step, the next step, and take that further. It was incredibly difficult, and it really did, having staked so much on that internally, it really did take a significant toll on me. I'm not ashamed to say that in any way, shape or form. One thing I was reflecting on just earlier with Nicola and Zoe was, at the same time, running simultaneously to that, and actually in the weeks wrapping around that interview, I was going through some very personal difficulties as well. So outside of work, I've got a horse, a dog, like 4,000 rabbits that my children have accumulated over the years. But I've got a very, very best friend that I've been friends with for a very long time, and we ride our horses together. And one sunny Sunday morning, we were riding our horses together and sort of side by side. And one minute she was there and the next minute she wasn't, because she'd had a brainstem hemorrhage and she fell off her horse. And she was put into an induced coma on the floor and was in an induced coma for 6 months. Now, that has significant ramifications for you emotionally. But at that point, I was the absolute queen of compartmentalization. So there was work Hayley, and there was horse Hayley, and there was Mam Hayley, and there was all sorts of other Hayleys, and never the 2, 3, 4, 5 would meet, because I could just chunk it up, and that's how I would deal with things. But coming out of the difficulties I had with my friend Jane, who incidentally, I should caveat, she is now 95% of the way back to her road to recovery, which is fantastic. I'll just lead with that. I should have led with that at the start. Having gone through that, and at the same time gone through a very difficult professional experience, and having the two at the same time really did change how I had the outlook to change some of those factors and take it forward, so that I could accept it all, first of all, and I could accept everything that I had been challenged with and everything I was facing, and also just try and use it to my ability, the best of my ability, try and use it to create some space in my own mind, restock, take help, go and speak to people, go and understand that actually I wasn't the only person, I wasn't the first, and I certainly won't be the last to face a challenge in my career. And that didn't mean to say that it was the end of the world, and it certainly wasn't the end of the career. So
Can I just interject, Hayley?
Absolutely, Nicola.
Yeah, I'm so glad Jane is okay, by the way.
Thank you.
I forgot to ask that in our briefing session earlier. What did you do, first of all, to pick yourself up from, from the side of the road A19 moment that you described so well? And I think someone else's, Louise on our chat has said, how rude was he to be prejudging your capability and potential? I'd have been crying too. I'm sure many people can empathise with that feeling when you just absolutely crushed and your dream, your plan has been ripped up, basically. So whilst you were coping with significant personal trauma at the same time, what did you do initially to pick yourself up from the blow that had been dealt?
So the very first thing I did was automatically, I think the person I am is I want a resolution immediately. I want to be able to see what my plan out of this difficulty is. And I had to accept, in this instance, I couldn't see a resolution immediately. And I had to allow myself and really force myself, because it's not a trait that came naturally and still doesn't, I still have to work on it, just to give myself a break, give myself a bit of headroom and say, it's okay. It's okay that as of 5 p.m. today, 5 o'clock at the side of the A19, you don't have a plan, or that your plan's essentially up in smoke by all accounts. And then I spent all weekend sort of on that vein. Every time I felt panicked or felt stressed or felt on the verge of tears again, that actually somebody had told me that this was all going to sort of dissipate and I was going back to square one, I used to just take 10 breaths, and really, really simple, but it was a real thing for me. Take 10 breaths, stop, look around me. Okay, we're okay. Nothing's fundamentally changed. Career path may have changed. We might go left instead of right. We have to deal with that. And then I tried to put it in a compartment until I was at a point emotionally that I could actually deal with that properly and formulate a proper plan. Because if I'd made any knee-jerk reactions, if I'd immediately got on the phone to some of my old colleagues in the private sector, which I could have quite easily done, and I'm sure would have picked up a job fairly easily, it would have been the wrong decision. It would have been a very knee-jerk decision and a very emotionally charged decision. And what I did not want to do was kind of take that feedback that I'd had from the interview round I'd just been through and come off the worse for it. I wanted to build on what I'd been told and make sure that actually I could come back bigger, stronger, more resilient, and more able to take the challenge forward and help others in the same position. Because by golly, if I was the only one feeling that I knew of, NHSI and NHSE had merged across the country. There was bound to be others that felt similarly challenged or similarly under pressure, and similarly with nowhere really to go. And it's a bit of a taboo subject. Nobody really wants to talk about it. Nobody really wants to talk about what happens when reorganisations don't go your way. So it was really about that, just taking stock, allowing myself to feel, quite frankly, quite rubbish for the weekend, and just giving myself that emotional break, and then starting to put some positive steps into place going forward. There's two things I did that made a massive difference, I would say, going forward. Like I said, I'm a lover of spreadsheets, lists, can't help it, never going to change, won't really apologise for it. I made a list of all the things that were in my control and the things that weren't in my control. And I know people will say this and always make lists and do it, but I genuinely sat down with a pen and said, right, these are the things in my control and these are the actions I'm going to take to account for those things. These are the things that aren't in my control and these are the strategies I'm going to use to cope with that, and just to make sure that I can actually cope with the fact that things will remain out of my control. And I broke it down as granularly as I could to get to that level where I could actually use it as a bit of paper, and I took it round, stick it in my handbag, and I took it round, and every time I felt a little bit overwhelmed, I would get it back out and say, no, I knew this was going to happen. I knew I was going to feel that way about that situation. And actually that was my strategy that I agreed with myself when I was feeling more calm about things, and I used that. The second thing I did was I called on my network of people. So you can probably tell I like a good chat, and I've got lots of people that I know very closely in the Northeast, and some more widely, and they'll be in the NHS and some aren't in the NHS. And I met with them and I talked to them, and I was absolutely, utterly gobsmacked at the number of challenges that people were coming back to me, which I had no idea about. So people in really senior positions had said, oh, well, this happened to me, or they were quite easily able to talk through very, very similar situations or their particular personal situation that they'd faced. And just sharing that made me feel so much less alone, and so much less like, in my eyes at that point, I don't feel like this anymore, like a bit of a failure. And it again took that pressure off my shoulders. Problem shared is a problem halved, and it's all of the old sort of strategies that come out. But it did take me forward. And one thing I'll never forget from a conversation I had with a CFO in one of our local CCGs, we talked about personal resilience, and he said, right, okay, we talked about his experience. He said, your time will come, and you don't know what that means. You don't know what position that will be. It may be a similar position. It may be something totally different, but just be ready for it when it comes. So do everything you can now when you've got that period of almost downtime in your career where you don't know exactly what the next step is, to take on opportunities, to soak in new experiences, to speak to people, to help people in other situations, to put the time back into your team development, so that you're actually, when that opportunity comes knocking, you're fully ready and you're out of that emotional headspace and you're more in a proactive, constructive headspace.
And can I just ask, because we all know that you're currently CFO of South Tyneside and Sunderland, so we know that it did end well. What was it that that ensured that you were in the right place at the right time to get that right role ultimately?
Well, I think it was a little bit about making sure that my network was aware that actually I wasn't ashamed to be looking for my next role. I was quite open to the fact that I'd probably come to the end of the road with everything I could do in my current team and my current role, and that was no detriment to either the work that I was actually doing or the team that I was doing with, because I was sad to leave them behind, and most of them have come with me, so that's also good. But it was having those conversations and just getting over that taboo a little bit, and kind of just getting yourself out there, making sure that you were linking with other women, but also other individuals in similar positions and other seniors across the Northeast and North Cumbria particularly. It's quite a tight-knit community, as I'm sure most regions are now because of the move towards ICBs particularly. And it was, again, just making myself ready for whatever filled the space in terms of the next step, so that people knew, actually, do you know what? I was talking to Hayley, and I'm sure she was talking about a next move and potentially looking into this sphere or looking into getting into new opportunities. I think that is what made the key difference for me, because then you found, well, I found particularly that actually people were picking up the phone and saying, actually, there's a really interesting project. Would you like to be involved? Or I've got a bit of a volunteering type of approach. I've got something, if you've got some extra time, could you come and help out with Project X or Project Y? And some of them were totally outside of my sphere of reference. But yeah, I got involved and I learned a lot of new skills as a result. And it got myself out of that sitting, waiting, or cold calling or cold applying to jobs. So I think that made a massive difference.
And one final question then for you, because this is a really remarkable story, actually. I love how you talk about it with such openness and honesty. Can you answer my original question? Do you think you can be successful in your career without having experienced failure? Because it sounds like from what you've done and what you've learned, that you've become better at handling yourself, really, and managing that, the compartmentalizing that you previously did, and so on.
I think success and failure are different to everybody. I think success for one person is fundamentally different to the next person, and equally so is failure. When I look back now, the fact I used to think that element of my life was a failure, I find quite, if I'm honest, a little bit embarrassing, because it really wasn't. It was a chunk, it was a different direction for a very small part of my career. I've had a really long, great career so far, and I hope to carry that on. I think you can be successful without elements of failure, but I think you'll be a whole lot more happy, and well, I think you'll be happier and more successful having had a failure and having dealt with it and having come through the other side. I certainly think the level of empathy and compassion definitely affect how I lead teams now. The way I can see things through various different lenses, massive difference to me, but also personally and mentally for my own well-being. Having gone through that difficult period and really feeling like a little bit like Stretch Armstrong, as in professional career wasn't going the way I planned, personally things were not looking good. You know, the potential loss of a best friend at the same time was just incredibly difficult. Still trying to raise 2 children, having a marriage, having a dog, having a horse, and competitively riding alongside of all of this as well. The pressure that you put, or well, we all put on ourselves through different spheres of our life, can sometimes be fundamentally extreme. Sometimes it won't all work out. I think that terrified me as a thought, much more than the reality of it not all working out all at the same time, because the reality of it was, we got through, I got through with support, friends, family, loved ones, and colleagues, and really drew on all of that. And now I do feel like personally and professionally, I'm in a much, much better place. So coming back, yes, I do think you can. I do think that I don't think you have to fail to be a success, but I do think it helps.
Thank you, Hayley. That's fantastic. You really are a masterclass in resilience in a number of different ways. So now I'm going to hand you across to Amanda and to Zoe, I think, is going to do the presentation. I'm sure there'll be a lot of common themes going across what you've just described, Hayley. But yeah, over to you, Amanda.
Hello. Yes. Thank you for inviting me to speak. And it's really hard to follow Hayley because there's so much richness in her story. I will try and draw out some of Blen's story of coaching hundreds of NHS leaders, 8A and above, over the last 2 years, and maybe weave in a bit of my story as well. So I'm Amanda. I founded Blend Associates 8 years ago on the back of a restructure. I was on the board of a large NHS trust, and the restructure meant that I found myself facing redundancy. That wasn't in my plan at 47. I'm 55 now. Wasn't in my plan because I was the main breadwinner. I had 2 kids in private school and a massive mortgage. I thought I was still going to stay in the boardroom and contribute, but life threw me a curveball. And it was the most wonderful curveball, because I spent the last 8 years getting a professional qualification as a coach and additional qualifications in psychometrics. And until 6 years ago, if we put the next slide up, 6 years ago, I'd just come back from working with the British School in New York and coaching their senior team, and had just started to make some links to coach a large British charity based in New York City as well as having a number of NHS and education contracts. And I and 2 or 3 coaches were doing that work together, and we thought, hey, we're doing okay. And then March 2020 came along, and you folks know this story. The NHS, I love this quote, if you like Star Trek, go to maximum warp speed, push it, give her all she's got, Captain. And all our work fell away. All our work fell away because we couldn't get to see people. The public sector, particularly the NHS and education, you were on emergency footing and you were responding to a global pandemic. And we had, through our network, lots of brilliant coaches working with the NHS Leadership Academy, working with NHS boards who are now not working. And so we thought to ourselves, we understand why all these assignments have been stopped. You need to lead a response to the pandemic. But surely leaders need coaches to stand alongside them as they face their biggest challenge. So we came up with the idea of carrying the village. Next slide, please. That was our vision, that we would find a way to stand alongside NHS leaders and their teams and see if we had some skills as master coaches to coach you through the pandemic. And we put this proposal to a number of STPs at the time, and Norfolk and Waveney STP said, yes, we'd like you to work with a large number of leaders at Band A and above. And we'd gathered together a faculty of 17 of us at the time. If we pass to that next slide. 17 of some of the best coaches out there. Some of you might have been coached by them, I might know them. And we put a framework around working with Blend being the umbrella organisation for this. We asked the coachees to complete a self-evaluation at the end of their coaching with us, and we got some fascinating data. And we have now got 35 plus coaches on our faculty, and we've recently won a place on the East of England Collaborative Framework for executive coaching. So we've had an interesting 2 years. But what I wanted to talk to you about was what leaders told us was their journey. So we asked all our coachees about their wellbeing challenges while they were leading and while we were coaching them. So next slide, please. And in the first 6 months, they told us, as we expected, that they were struggling with really high levels of anxiety and sadness. We then did full year data. We had a number of other contracts by this time, and we realised that anxiety had actually increased a bit in the first 12 months of the pandemic. And so we were really aware that leaders 8A and above and their teams' well-being had been phenomenally challenged through the pandemic. And we saw that in our coaching sessions. So I'm the managing director, but I coach about 20% of my time. And as we talked as coaches about our clients' experience, we saw that that was probably one of the biggest challenges leading major business transformation across the NHS, whilst leading yourself. So we also got some data on how coaching contributed to building personal resilience. So if we can see that next slide. And we got some really good data out of how coaching helped people. So our theory that if we could stand alongside leaders as they led the NHS through this pandemic, that coaching would help, the data was coming back that it was helping, particularly thinking more clearly, having a plan, feeling more in control of what you were doing. But not least in that first year of the pandemic, I don't know, 3-4 waves of the pandemic you saw in that time as the NHS, 21% of our clients said they worried less about work when they weren't at work. People were really overworking. You will have all been overworking, setting up payroll from your kitchen tables. We've heard all those stories from that first lockdown. So that idea that coaching could help you build your personal resilience, and then something about what the coaches brought to the process. Next slide, please. I'm not going to dwell on that other than to show you what people found, and the quotes at the bottom I think stand out. Dedicate time for myself. Coaches challenging my thinking, managing work expectations and self-resilience, feeling in more control of what I'm doing. And that was the mindset they needed during the pandemic. So we spent quite a lot of time thinking about the space of resilience with our clients individually and their teams. And next slide, please. I love this quote because we have the thing I love about coaching and that I love about running a coaching business is that we know that you're not born strong. You're not born with a fixed amount of resilience. Hayley talked about it like a muscle. You can build it up and you can draw on it when you need it. And so many people have hit setbacks, and it's in those setbacks that they've grown the most. So, you know, that idea that you can grow your resilience is something we as coaches see, we know. So next slide, please. It's the belief in yourself and the belief in something larger than yourself. And I just want to pick out again some of the things Hayley said that I heard. So that crashing confidence, the fact it's not part of your plan, but that self-coaching that Hayley described, using networks, identifying what's in your control and not in your control, the Covey 7 habits of highly effective people, what's in your control, what you can influence and what's not in your control. Fabulous story of that journey through this and coming back and being ready. Because we know that you get better at resilience. Next slide, please. By accepting who you are, by starting where you are. Oh, little bit of feedback there. I think somebody, yeah. So accepting who you are, I really heard that in Hayley's story. You know, I make lists. I'm somebody who's usually on my plan. You know, this is who I am. This is where my future was going. So accepting who you are, but starting where you are and being self-aware. Okay, this hasn't worked out. How do I galvanize, and how do I get a plan going forward? Getting support, using your networks, being positive about growth, being positive that tomorrow I can do better than today. strengthening areas that you're not so good in, and learning new skills, that feedback. I wanted to show you a simple plan that we've used with a lot of our clients around resilience. And if I can show you the next slide, this is just a visual of post-its of things summarizing the data from neuroscience predominantly about the things that help us build our resilience. So talking about how we feel, building healthy relationships, looking after our physical health, practicing your faith or mindfulness. Hayley talked about breathing, the power of breathing to just take yourself out of a situation where you feel out of control. Loving sleep and eating well, giving yourself time to relax, you know, not putting yourself under pressure to get straight back into something. Saying no to the stuff or the people that don't help your well-being, practicing gratitude, being curious and learning new things, being kind to yourself, learning to like yourself, who you are. If you're a list person, you're a list person, and that's wonderful. Getting to know your moods and triggers, the situations and the things that bring you up and down, and doing something just for the love of it. When we coach women and men, we notice that men tend to be better at keeping the things in their life that they just do for the love of it. Women tend to be the first ones to give up the stuff they love when they've got other responsibilities, be it work, be it family, be it life getting too busy. So actually having something you do for the love of it, for which there's no pressure to perform, no competition, is really helpful. Now, this isn't a list that we have to do everything. When we work with clients, we get them to identify the 2 or 3 things they're already doing. The fact that they're in a senior role in the public sector means they have a level of resilience. So they will all be doing, you will all be doing 2 or 3 things here really well. And what we have said to people through the pandemic is, have you forgotten those habits? How are you going to get back to them? And then pick one thing that you could introduce that would help you. So for me, managing a busy coaching company that's grown quite a lot in the last 2 years, I spent too much time at work managing the business, supporting the business's growth, and I've got back to sculpture, something I haven't done since I did A-level art a very long time ago, and I just lose myself in a sculpture piece. If you see me on Twitter, you'll see it emerging, and that has done wonders both for my well-being generally, but my resilience to keep doing the job I do and grow the company that I'm really pleased to be associated with. So just find something, anything that you can just learn and you can love, and that will make you stronger and more resilient. I'm aware of time here. We've also been doing some work with teams in the last 6 months or so, looking back over the last 1.5 to 2 years and helping them think about coming out. So some of resilience is about realizing, and this image is very deliberately a scuba diver, because if you come up too quickly without paying attention to the physiology, you'll get the bends and get very sick. So something we've also been doing with leaders and teams is helping them sort of decompress a bit, coming back out. What's been good about COVID? What changes have we had to make that have been really positive that we want to hold on to? What's been difficult? Where are we going to land going forward? So part of our coaching has been helping leaders and their teams thinking about that as well. So some quick reflections of what we've learned over the last 2 years. For some of our clients, we've seen them lead through traumatic situations and grow through it, change how they work, change their priorities, see real success in innovations in the workplace. learning from what's worked, what hasn't, keeping what's worked, ditching what hasn't, and developing a vocabulary for talking about well-being and resilience, even people in boardrooms. And it's delightful to be here talking about resilience for that reason. But for others, you know, we have seen some PTSD, we have seen some burnout, we've definitely seen compassion fatigue in the NHS, and some people have decided they've had enough and reprioritised. So just, you don't have to be a doctor to access the wonderful wellbeing resources on the BMA website. There's some really nice, I'm not a doctor, but I recommend it to everyone, really interesting materials there that anyone can access if you're worried about yourself or any colleagues. And final slide, I believe. I love this quote. Glinda in The Wizard of Oz, you've always had the power, my dear, you just had to learn it for yourself. And I think what stood out for me from Hayley's presentation is she found her power in that difficult place. You found your power and you've used that power to move you forward and on your career. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about what we've been doing, but to really the privilege of hearing Hayley's story has been great. That's it from me.
Thank you, Amanda. That was fantastic. And you've just brought theory to Hayley's experience and brought it all together, actually. So I'd love, if anyone has questions, please can you put them on the chat function? Then we can, if you're comfortable with that, where you can put your video on and ask a question to Hayley or to Amanda yourself. In the meantime, I will kick off with the question, because we've spoken quite a bit about, I think you mentioned it, Amanda, the crash in confidence. Hayley had that moment as well. And many of you will have had that. And in fact, I think Opiemi mentioned it on the chat. Because of, I guess, you build up the opportunity of a promotion or a new job or a move in your career or something that you're looking forward to, you are worried about then that crash, what happens if you don't get it. So what tips do you have, Amanda or Hayley, for how not to be afraid of failure so that you are wholeheartedly able to still put yourself forward for something that you really want?
I think people have said in the text that if you're not failing, you're not moving forward. So, you know, put yourself forward. This is something you really want. Get good support. We would always say get a coach to coach you through that next step. You may not get the first post you go for, but always get feedback and learn from it and grow through it. But don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Because, you know, there are so many opportunities, but it's about getting yourself in that place and think about how to build your confidence as well. Often as women, we lack confidence and that holds us back. There are lots of things you can do to help you with your confidence. And remember that the people who appear confident usually aren't. They're usually faking it quite effectively as well. So, you know, don't put yourself under too much pressure. Hayley, what do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, I've put in the chat box, I've always been afraid of failure. It's not something I've cracked this. I have not cracked that at all, and I still work on it, but I recognise it. And I think that's part of it. I think if you recognise that that is going to be difficult for you and you reach out to counterparts, mentors, coaches, I've always been a good advocate of, I've always had a mentor, not a formal one, just people I've linked with throughout my career who I've kept in touch with, and I've been able to just chew the fat on some meaty issues to try and understand, actually, am I going in the right direction? Is there another view of this? Am I having an overly emotional response? Am I not having enough of an emotional response? You know, those sorts of things. And then have faith in yourself. Have faith in yourself. You don't have to be the most confident person in the room just to believe, just that little light inside yourself, that you've got yourself this far. You've got a career, you've got a job, you've got an input, you've got a role in life and society. Have that bit of faith in yourself and just keep on going back to it, because it's surprising that when you've got that little light inside, it doesn't matter how small, if it's there, it will continue to burn, and it will get brighter and brighter the more that you go through these roles, and the more that you have your life experience and your professional experience and all your varied experiences across the whole spectrum of who you are through the different compartments that I've previously talked about that I've got in my life. That itself should give you your own self-confidence. You don't have to shout it to the room. You don't have to wear it on a name badge or kind of be the loudest in the room to show everybody that you're confident. Just have a little bit of faith in yourself.
Thank you. It's a fantastic answer. I think something you picked up on, Amanda, was confidence and how that can sometimes be a little bit different and from a female perspective. And whilst our network is called Women in Leadership for Finance, we do have men and women on our network. It's not exclusively a female thing, but I am interested to hear if you feel that there is a difference in how women build resilience or their approach to resilience.
Yes, and there's a question in the chat I really want to answer as well. So in terms of approaching your career trajectory, there's lots of data out there that men will take a chance at things generally where women feel like they have to tick everything on the person spec. So, you know, understanding that sometimes less talented men will get jobs because they just have the confidence to give it a try. So, you know, realize that dynamic is there and stretch yourself and just put yourself forward for things, because the guys will be. It's not all women, all men, but there does tend to be a gender bias there. I think there's something about fit. I think for women, fit with the culture of the team and fit with your colleagues is even more important to allow you to lead the way you want to lead. And I suppose the thing, you know, if I could go back 8 years again, what would I do differently? I wouldn't have pleaded to stay. I didn't fit that board and that culture, and I know that now. I know that clearly. And there were other things in the future for me to grab hold of. So, you know, take the opportunities, push yourself a bit harder, even if you think, oh, I'm not sure I can, because the worst thing that can happen is they could say you're not quite ready for this, and you get the feedback and you work on that. And I think fit, I think I've been increasingly interested in fit. So don't just think about technically that job, think about, you know, is this a group of people? Is this a board that that there's a place for you for, that you'll connect with, and you can lead the way you want to lead? Because I think women if you do the work on understanding your leadership style, that will help you think about the teams you fit well in, the teams you lead well, how you approach things. So yeah, I'd say that, you know, be braver than you might normally be and go for things, but also do a bit of sort of analysis, not just of the technical tasks, but the fit of the team. The other thing we're doing is we're just partnered in Blend with a company that do physiological psychometrics, where you wear a bit of wearable technology for a week, linked to Loughborough University, and the data they use with elite athletes. And we want to bring this to some boards and some boardrooms, because we think women from that data are carrying probably 20–30% more stress than their male counterparts because of all their other responsibilities. And what they know from elite athletes is you can't run a 4x100 every day of the week. You need rest, you need recuperation, you need nutrition, you need to train. And so the idea that women are carrying more stress in corporate roles, and we're fairly certain the pandemic's made that worse for women because they tend to have borne the caring responsibilities. So, you know, look after yourselves, be bolder, and be confident to find your fit, I would say.
Thank you. Hayley, do you have anything you want to add to that question? It was around do women build resilience differently from men? Also, I was going to ask you about two elements to this question. Sorry, I'll get this in before the webinar finishes. You mentioned that it's often not discussed about the shrinking opportunities, fewer opportunities, and I think this is why we wanted to run this webinar in the first place, was to acknowledge that and to help people build resilience during that time. So I wondered if there's anything that you wanted to add to that comment and how we can talk about it more, what benefit that would be.
Yeah, I think on the sort of the women building resilience, I think women are phenomenal, full stop. But I think women are phenomenal at building resilience. I think being a woman means certain things and means different things to everybody, and I know that. But having gone through my journey as a woman and faced some really unique challenges as a woman, and if I compare that to my husband's journey, and particularly across the pandemic, everything you're saying, Amanda, sort of in terms of caring responsibilities and, you know, making packed lunches for 75 at the same time as trying to do 6 different levels of maths and hold a webinar and do a Teams and write a report and submit numbers to regulators all at the same time. I do think that has changed the course of how we can evidence how women build and maintain resilience. In terms of the taboo around the ever reducing number of roles, we've got to break it. And from my point of view, there's enough of us, you know, there's enough people within this conversation to just start having that conversation, quite frankly. Just be open about it. Have it with your peers, have it with your teams. Be as open and transparent about all of these, the conversation that we're having now back in your trusts and your CCGs, in whichever world that you live in as part of the NHS, and really kind of expose that, and then think about strategies to take it forward. So, you know, it may be that there's not going to be the same number of roles with the same titles that we've got, but actually the NHS is full of really fantastic people and some really serious talent, a lot of which, you know, we're sitting around the virtual table here, and we're all here today because we're sharing that talent and we're sharing the fact that we all want to be in this for the long game. Get those people, build a forum, and get this message out so that it's not a taboo, taking it forward. All of these people will still have skin in the game. We all still want to be here. We all still want to be driving the NHS forward to future-proof it, to take it forward for our children and our relatives and future generations. We do all that, then actually the choice is in our hands to stop it being a taboo and have those conversations and have it quite openly with your board and with your staff in terms of PDPs and opportunities, and share it through networks, informally, formally, but get it out there. Because I think the more that we hide behind that and we hide behind uncertainty, the worse the taboo will get, and that doesn't do anyone any good. And certainly you might see that in more junior levels of our teams, that the uncertainty starts to become toxic because nobody wants to live in an uncertain world, and uncertainty drives that poor behaviour, understandably so. So if we can help that, now and kind of filter that down, I think that's on all of our shoulders and that's all of our responsibility, but it's something we can change.
Amanda, you're nodding in agreement as well.
Yes, I think the privilege and the responsibility to share our stories is what I picked up there from Hayley. You know, there's a phrase: if you can't see it, you can't be it. So if we look around to, you know, other women in management in the public sector who think, oh, I'd like to do that, but I don't know how, you know, and in drawing women through. I know as a female founder, I set up another company yesterday. It took 5 minutes of something I'm just going to play with over the next year. I've done nothing other than pick the company name and get the articles of association. But I'm really proud to be a female founder. Only about 20% of founders in the UK and the US are women, and we only get about just under 3% of any venture capital finance. I haven't taken any finance, but if I needed it, it would be a battle. And I think, you know, I'm proud to be a woman in that field, and I'm proud of what women can contribute as company owners and founders. And I think, you know, you should feel really proud of what you can contribute in finance and in the public sector, and talk about it more, because if people can see you talking about it, they can be it too. And that's about, you know, and you can expose some of the challenges that stop people making progress as well, I think would be what I'd say.
Thank you, Amanda and Hayley. That's fantastic to hear from both of you, from your experience as a coach and a female founder, Amanda, and from yours and your journey to where you are, Hayley, and beyond as well. I'll hand you back over now to Zoe for the wrap up, because believe it or not, we're almost at 6 o'clock.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Amanda and Hayley. So as ever, I've got the unenviable job of trying to wrap up and summarise what's been a wide range and incredibly inspirational discussion this afternoon. So I will be super quick. I'm conscious of the time. So I think we've heard about grit and resilience, about personal experience of knockbacks, which include unplanned circumstances and left field setbacks that aren't part of a career path, and how we've seen Hayley and Amanda overcome those, and some of the tools that we can put in place to overcome those ourselves. I think some of the messages that I've taken away is that there aren't always instant solutions, so we need to step back and give ourselves a little bit of a break, be kind to ourselves and reflect on what we've learned, not for too long, and then move forward. So understanding what's within our own control and what's out with our control, so understanding what we can do and what we can do to support ourselves and others. I've also written the word inspirational down here again, because I think I need to say that at least twice. Also, just picking up from some of the things that Amanda was saying. So I was really taken by the description of resilience as a muscle and how we can build that ourselves and make it stronger throughout our experiences. And then I'm just going to end on something that Amanda said around being brave. So let's be brave. Let's look for those opportunities and support each other in taking those opportunities. And again, we've talked about a couple of times about the importance of networks, the importance of our own personal networks, the importance of networks like this. So I'd like everyone to take that message clearly away from what we've discussed this afternoon. So I'll leave the summary there. I'm conscious of time. Just let me just wrap up quickly. So a couple of proper thank yous. So thank you so much, Amanda and Hayley, for your time this afternoon. Thank you for your openness and your honesty and sharing your experiences with us. It has been absolutely fantastic. And thank you, Nicola, for being my co-host again this evening. And thank you all for your attendance this afternoon. So thank you to the network and for your engagement and for your brilliant questions, which I think most have been answered in the chat, but if some haven't, we will take those away and get answers for you as well. So just in terms of future webinars, as we've done in the past, we are rerunning this webinar at a time that will be accessible to others, which is midday on Monday, the 7th of March, so next Monday. So please do join us if you would like to see it again, but please also tell others who would like to join. So as you know, we're doing that as a direct result of the feedback that we've had from the network. So please do continue to give us your thoughts and your feedback. Please let us know if there are particular topics or speakers that you'd like to hear from, and we will take that forward to make sure that we are focusing our support in the right elements. In terms of our next webinar, as I said, this is the start of a mini series. So we're planning to do the next webinar in late April, which hopefully will try and fit in with the finance timetable we're working with at the moment, and continue along the theme of support through change. And then before I close, I just wanted to remind you all that a week today, the 8th of March, is International Women's Day. So although we're not doing anything as a network particularly this year, I just wanted to signpost you to a couple of things that I know are happening. So the Women in Health and Care Network are running a morning event, which is free to attend for members that morning. So if you want the details of that, let me know and I can send those through, but that's definitely worth joining. And SEMA are also putting together a series of interviews with inspirational women, so definitely worth linking in with that. The theme for this year's International Women's Day is Break the Bias. So that's the end of the formal part of our webinar this evening. Thank you again for joining. Nicola and I and Amanda and Hayley will stay on for a little while after the call. So if you want to hang on, have a bit of an informal chat, as we do sometimes, then please do that. If not, I look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, if not before. Thank you.